Hello everyone! Today, I'm going over a budget commander deck that I've brewed around Zul Ashur, Lich Lord. As usual, I've designed this deck to list for less than $45 at the time of recording, using prices listed by Scryfall, including our basic lands at 10 cents each, but this won't include costs such as shipping. So, Zul Ashur, Lich Lord, is a 2/2 legendary zombie warlock, costing 1 and a black to cast, with a ward of paying 2 life, and it can be tapped to let you cast a target zombie creature card from your graveyard that turn. So, to summarize this deck in one word, zombies. Though to use a few more words, this is certainly a zombies tribal deck, where we're going to be predominantly filling it with zombie creature cards, with many of those zombies having either useful activated abilities or enter the battlefield effects. And in concert with things like sack outlets, we'll have a little bit of self-mill since we'd be able to cast the plurality of the cards in this deck from the graveyard, so we can roughly consider the grave to be an extension of our hand. But that's a quick overview, let's get into the 99 of this deck, starting with our ramp. First up is Wayfarer's Bauble, which we can sack to tutor a basic land onto the battlefield tapped. And then we have a few generic producing mana rocks with Prismatic Lens, the Iron Crag, Mind Stone, and Liquid Metal Torque. But to get a bit more access to black mana, we do have Arcane Signet and Heraldic Banner, with the latter also giving your black creatures +1 power. But let's move on and start going over some of the many zombies in this deck. First up is Butcher Ghoul with Undying, so if it dies without a +1/+1 counter on it, it's returned to the battlefield under its owner's control with a +1/+1 counter on it. Champion of the Parish is a 1-drop 1/1 that gets a +1/+1 counter whenever another zombie enters the battlefield under your control. And Unbreathing Horde gets a +1/+1 counter for each other zombie you control and zombie card in your graveyard when it enters the battlefield, while damage to it gets prevented and instead you remove a +1/+1 counter from it. Hungry Ghoul can act as a sack source, sacking a creature to put a +1/+1 counter on it. While Plague Belcher is a 3-drop 5/4 with Menace, though you put 2 -1/-1 counters on a creature you control when it enters the battlefield, but it also has it so our opponents lose 1 life whenever a zombie we control dies. Arc Ghoul of Thraben has you look at the top card of your library whenever it or another zombie you control dies, which you can reveal that card if it's a zombie card and put it in your hand, or otherwise, you could put it into your graveyard. Loyal Subordinate is a 3/1 with Menace that has our opponents lose 3 life at the beginning of our combat, provided we control our commander. And Shepherd of Rot can be tapped to make each player lose 1 life for every zombie in play. Headless Rider and Tormod, the Desecrator, give us some ways to get some 2/2 zombie creature tokens. The former whenever it or another non-token zombie you control dies, and the latter whenever 1 or more cards leave your graveyard. Dreadslaver makes it so creatures that die the same turn that Dreadslaver dealt damage to them are returned to the battlefield under your control as a black zombie along with its other colors and types. Accursed Horde could be used to give some attacking zombies indestructible, and Infectious Horror has each opponent lose 2 life whenever it attacks. And we have a classic with Gary, Merchant of Asphodel, which has each opponent lose life equal to your devotion to black when it enters the battlefield, with you gaining as much life as life was lost that way. And wrapping up this section, though there will definitely be more zombies in later chapters, we have a collection of zombies that are also anthems, each giving other zombies you control +1/+1, starting with Risen Executioner, which could be cast from your graveyard without using our commander, Death Baron, also giving our other zombies Death Touch, Cemetery Reaper, which could be used as a bit of graveyard hate while also being a source of zombie tokens, and Lord of the Accursed, which could be used to give zombies menace until the end of the turn. Now, given that our graveyard is something of an extension of our hand, mill is far from the worst thing for us, so we also have Mire Triton, Undead Butler, and Stitcher Supplier, which have us mill as they enter the battlefield, with the Triton milling 2 and the others milling 3. Ripples of Undeath has you mill 3 at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, of which you could return a likely non-zombie card from among those 3 to your hand by paying 1 and 3 life, while Cemetery Tampering lets you choose to mill 3 at the beginning of your upkeep, and it also has Hideaway 5, where you look at the top 5 cards of your library and exile one of those cards face down, with the others going to the bottom of your library in a random order, of which you can play that exiled card without paying its mana cost, provided this is procced and you have at least 20 cards in your graveyard. And while it's not exactly mill and I don't normally use tutors, I do have Violent Tumor in this deck, which itself is a 2/2 zombie with Death Touch that has you tutor a card and put it into your graveyard when it enters the battlefield. Now, before getting into interaction, I'd like to talk about 3 cards that I had a hard time slotting into any given chapter, starting with Into the Pit, which lets you look at the top card of your library at any time, of which you can cast spells from the top of your library by sacking a non-land permanent along with its other costs. So, now our graveyard and the top of our library are extensions of our hand. Graph Harvest gives our zombies menace as an enchantment, while also giving us the option to turn our likely non-zombie cards in the graveyards into zombie creature tokens, provided we have the mana left over for it. And Endless Ranks of the Dead has the potential to really balloon your board state, as you make X 2/2 zombie creature tokens at the start of your upkeep, with X being half the number of zombies you control rounded down. But with that, let's move on to our interaction spells. Starting with sorceries, we have Feed the Swarm to destroy a target creature or enchantment, though you lose life equal to that permanent's mana value. And then we have Eaten Alive and Final Vengeance, which can be used to exile a target creature, though the former either costs 1 black and that you sack a creature, or it costs 3 and a black, but it could exile a planeswalker as well. And the latter requires you to sack a creature or enchantment. Then for instance, we have Doomblade to destroy a target non-black creature, Go for the Throat to destroy a target non-artifact creature, and Infernal Grasp to destroy a creature, though you lose 2 life. Swift End is an adventure instant that destroys a target creature or planeswalker while you lose 2 life, but it also has a 2/3 zombie creature, Murderous Rider, to cast later, or alternatively. And then Defile and Tragic Slip work through -1/-1 counters, the former giving your creature as many of those as swamps that you control, and the latter gives only 1 at base, but it gives 13 of those counters if a creature had died that turn, of which these could definitely be useful to get around indestructible creatures. Then we have a decent smattering of interaction on zombies themselves, with a Cursed Marauder and Fleshbag Marauder, which I'd consider putting in the main zombies chapter, but they have each person sack a creature, non-token for a Cursed Marauder, when they enter the battlefield. And given that we can cast zombies from our graveyard, these actually make decent targets for us to sack, as we can force more sack later. Crypt Creeper can be sacked for a bit of graveyard hate, while Withered Wretch can have mana paid into it for some graveyard hate. Stronghold Assassin can be tapped while sacking a creature to destroy a target non-black creature, and Agent of Erebos exiles a target player's graveyard whenever it or another enchantment enters the battlefield under your control. Then Noxious Ghoul kind of acts as a non-zombie weenies wipe for this deck, as when it or another zombie comes into play, all non-zombie creatures get -1/-1 for the turn. But for actual board wipes, I've slotted in Decree of Pain, destroying all creatures and having you draw a card for each creature destroyed that way, and Blood Money, also destroying all creatures but giving you a tap treasure token for each creature destroyed that way. But with that, let's move on to our pile of draw spells. Starting with Endless Atlas, which can be tapped with 2 mana to draw a card, provided you have 3 or more lands with the same name, of which the vast majority of the lands in this deck are basic swamps, which would meet that requirement quite easily. Then Village Rites and Corrupted Conviction have you draw 2 after sacking a creature, with Deadly Dispute doing the same, but also making a treasure token. Fellstinger is a zombie scorpion that can have you sack a creature as it enters the battlefield, to have a target player draw 2 and lose 2 life. And then Vampiric Rites and Witch's Cauldron let you sack a creature to draw 1 and gain a life. And then Midnight Reaper deals 1 damage to you and you draw a card whenever a non-token creature you control dies, while Undead Augur also has you draw 1 and lose a life whenever it or another zombie you control dies. Phyrexian Arena has you draw a card and lose a life at the start of your upkeep. Vanquisher's Banner has you choose a creature type when it enters the battlefield, and then creatures of those type you control get +1/+1, and you draw a card whenever you cast a creature spell with that type. And the last card I'm going to mention here is Graveborn Muse, which in my testing you might want to be a bit careful with and have a sack outlet on hand, as at the beginning of your upkeep you draw X cards and lose X life, with X being the number of zombies you control. Great for refilling a hand and having access to a ton to cast, but it could also drain you quite fast if you have a bunch of zombies on the board. But now that we've gone through all of the spells in this deck, let's very quickly go over our lands, of which I actually only have 2 non-basics in this deck, starting with Myriad Landscape, which we can sack to get, in our case, 2 basic swamps onto the battlefield tapped, and Path of Ancestry, which will let us scry 1 whenever we cast a zombie or a warlock, with mana produced from it. And aside from that, we'll fill the rest of this deck with 33 basic swamps. And now that we've gone through all 100 cards in this deck, let's take a look at that price. And as you can see here, this deck is currently listing just under $45 at the time of recording, which does include our basic lands at 10 cents each, but it's just a list price, so this doesn't include costs such as shipping and the like. Now before closing out this video, I'd like to go over a few upgrades or alternative spell types you may wish to consider if you're wanting to build something based off this deck with a bit higher budget. Magerite Stone and Patriarch Steel could let you untap your commander, so you could cast a second target zombie from your graveyard. Or alternatively, you could use spells like Reanimate to get more than 1 zombie out of your yard in a turn. For some more zombie token generation, Diagraph Colossus makes a 2/2 zombie token whenever you cast a zombie spell, and Grave Titan makes 2 zombie tokens whenever it ETBs or attacks. Poxwalkers and Gravecrawler are some zombies that we could get out of our graveyard quite easily without having to use Zul Ashur's ability. Then Zombie Master and Mykias the Unhallowed are some more zombie anthems, the former giving your zombie Swamp Walk and the ability to be regenerated, and the latter giving your non-human creatures +1/+1 and Undying. while Haunted one would make it so whenever you tap Zul Ashur, either to swing or to cast a zombie from your graveyard, your other zombies would get +2 power and Undying for the rest of the turn. And Unmarked Grave and Buried Alive are a few more grave-based tutors if you're wanting to play with those. But I should be closing out this video, so if you'd like to build, adapt, upgrade, or otherwise play with this deck, the link, as always, is in the description down below. If you like the video, consider dropping it a like, and maybe drop a sub if you'd like more of these kinds of videos in your feeds. Regardless, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.